Today, the purpose is to try to deconstruct the myth around it to best depict its reality. But before starting, let me remind you some rules so that the masterclass can take place in the best conditions. So please put your phone on silent mode and turn off your microphone and camera to facilitate recording. A time dedicated to question is planned at the end of the masterclass. It is a moment of exchange and respect of opinion, so there are no stupid questions, and obviously you can take notes. Let me introduce myself very quickly. So I'm Veihei Lacroix, and I'm an assistant project manager PMO trainee at Fit Retail since April the 11th. I'm also a student in the first year of a master's degree in project management, and I'm graduated with a degree in information and communication and also a literary baccalaureate. So you can know more about my role at Fit Retail. I participated in the creation of Fit Retail's own project management toolbox, which is available on the SharePoint, and the creation of Fit Retail's support project toolbox. And finally, I was asked to organize and animate a masterclass that I present to you today. Now, let me briefly present you the main points that we will discuss throughout this masterclass. So first of all, I'll make an introduction of the method with some definitions and a reminder of the context and the origins. Then I'll make a contrast between the classic project management methodology and the agile one, so you can understand what the advantages and the disadvantages are. In the second part of this masterclass, I'll present you two types of agile methodologies. So here, SCRUM and Kanban. And I'll finish with a list of other agile methodologies that exist and a list of certifications related to the agile method. So if it's okay for you, we are going to start. So the Agile method is one of the several project management methodologies that exist. And we used to say that we work in Agile mode when using it. And the Agile method is characterized by short cycles known as sprints or iterations that you may have heard at Fit Retail. I hope so. And the durations of a cycle varies between 1 week and 1 month. This method appeared in the 2000s in a context in which the classic project management methodology was more and more considered as binding because of the duration of its cycles, which varies between 12 and 24 months, so 1 to 2 years, which is a very long cycle. And you may have heard about the project management methodology under the name of V model or the waterfall method. In parallel, you have to know that search and studies around the Agile method led to the creation of a document that codifies it and which is called the Agile Manifesto, in which you will find the values of the method. So the first value assumes that the individual placed at the heart of concerns and interactions must be put forward more than processes and tools. Then the second value implies to favor operational software rather than exhaustive documentation. For example, at Fit Retail, there is VRAIC. The third value requires taking a collaborative perspective rather than negotiating with the client. And finally, the last value of the method induces to move towards adaptation to change rather than strictly following a pre-established plan. Just before I show you the differences between the classic project management methodology and the agile one, I wanted to remind you the different phases of a project at Fit Retail so that you can better situate yourself related to what I will explain to you right after. So as you may see on the screen, there are 8 project phases at Fit Retail. The first one, which is the audit and framing, following by the functional and technical specification. Then in third, you have the implementation, following by the reception and system validation. In fifth, you have the delivery, following by the training and the production launch preparation. And the last phase is the closure with the support. So now let's see the real differences between the classic method and the agile method. As you can see, for the classic project management methodology, I choose the V model. Actually, this is the one that was most mentioned during my interviews with the Fit Retail employees. So in the V model, design, realization, and validation are the 3 main steps of the classic project management methodology. And they are characterized by sequential or linear phases. In the other hand, I want you to keep in mind that this method requires a detailed approach that leaves little room for change, and that each phase of progress must be validated before it can move on to the next. About the agile method, it involves dividing the project into several stages that will give rise to the repetition of several operations. Here, the iterative system of the agile method that I mentioned earlier in the introduction can be adapted into software development, for example. And here, I want you to keep in mind that this is a method that leaves more room for the change or the evolution of the project which is still in progress. To make it clearer for you, I have done this board to really compare the V model with the agile method. So as you can see, the V model requires to have specifications, but also an important and detailed documentation upstream of the project, which is created by the project manager. While in the agile method, here it involves the participation of all the stakeholders in iteration planning. Also, where the V model requires only a few monitoring and control points, the agile method requires regular meetings to adapt production steps according to new demands or to plan the necessary adjustments identified during the tests. In the V model, the delivery comes at the end of the project development cycle, since all the functionalities must be carried out and tested before the final delivery of the product. Whereas with the agile method, the delivery is split since functionalities are developed one after the other, according to a prioritization established at the beginning of the project. Actually, it will allow the customer to receive a product not finalized, but usable quite quickly. And finally, in the V model, the detection of risk is done late since it is necessary to wait until the end of the development to implement the test phase of the project. While in the agile mode, the flexibility ensures a better responsiveness and therefore reduced risks. Now, let me present you the advantages of the agile method. As you can see, there are 4 advantages. The first one, which is the flexibility, because it is a method that allows an employee to quickly adapt to the environment in which he evolves. Then you have the feedback, since by collecting feedback returned from the customers, it will be easier for you to identify areas for improvement and therefore better answer to the needs of the next cycle. For the third advantage, I choose the efficiency because working in short cycle engages more deliverables and allows the client to have a more concrete vision of the project. And finally, you have the quality, which is guaranteed by the three advantages I just mentioned. So flexibility, feedbacks, efficiency. And because a method doesn't have only advantages, here are the three disadvantages that I've selected for you. The first one, which is documentation. Indeed, it is difficult to maintain a fixed documentation because of the many possible evolutions within the same project. Here, the consequence will be that there may be a risk of having documents that are not representative of the final project. Then you have the request management, since collecting feedbacks requires to manage a bigger request number. And the consequence must be that the project management will be affected. This leads us to the last disadvantage, which is the difficulties in estimating, because as we already know, taking feedback into account presupposes the evolutions of needs. This makes it difficult to properly frame a project, and so the risk here is to end up with heavier budgetary costs or an extension of the end of the project and a lack or surplus of resources. To make sure that you understand what I just explained, I've created this game, which consists in choosing between the classic method and the agile ones, depending on the context, the sentence that you can see. So I'll let you write your answer in comments. And please, Laure, can you give me the general answer when it's okay? So for the first one, if the customer has a clear idea of the final deliverable, would you choose the classic method or the agile one? Okay, I see two answers, which says classic, classic. Okay, so yes, it's classic. On two, the stakeholders have a schedule that doesn't allow them to be available. Would you choose classic or agile? Hmm? Okay, yes, it is classic. In third, the client fully trusts you concerning the progress of the project. Classic or agile? Someone else? No. So yes, it's agile. Then you have a short feature launch time. Would you choose classic or agile? Okay, perfect. Yes, it's agile. And finally, the client wants to be informed about the progress of the project, classic or agile. So here it's agile. Okay, so it was clear. So let's go on the second part of the masterclass. Here, I said that I'm going to present you two types of Agile project management methodologies. Here's Scrum and Kanban, and the first one I want to present to you is the Scrum method, which I recommend to use when a project requires flexibility. There is no planning constraint that is too rigid, but the framework remains clear enough not to lose sight of the objectives. And you have to know that the Scrum method is based on 3 pillars. The first one, which is transparency, with the necessity to make the information accessible and understandable to all project members. To make it understandable, you have to share a basic language and definitions. And I want you to keep in mind that here, the emphasis is rather on soft skills such as daring to say things that are difficult to hear, recognizing and learning from mistakes, but also knowing how to say no. Then the second pillar is the inspection, which is led by all the team members and which serves to verify that the expected deliverable is in line with the objectives defined at the beginning of the period. The inspection is organized on a regular and reasonable rhythm. And finally, the last pillar is the adaptation, which intervenes when a problem is revealed during the inspection on all the tasks performed. Here, the operation must then be adjusted to achieve the objectives of the current phase. The method is also built around 3 artifacts. The first one, which is the project backlog. So this artifact is a list in which you will find all the needs and features raised by the clients, the users, or even the Scrum team. Actually, this is where you'll find all the features, the requirements, the improvements and fixes that must be done from the most important to the least important. So there is really this notion of prioritization. At Fit Retail, you may have heard about the quick win, which consists in favoring small features, but which will pay off a lot. In other words, to favor features that take little time, but that will satisfy a lot. Then the second artifact is the sprint backlog, which contains the user stories and bugs to fix that were accepted during the sprint planning. In the sprint backlog, there are at least the following categories: to do, in progress, and done. And finally, you have the project increment, which is the partial deliverable that is delivered at the end of each sprint, a prototype that is already operational at the end of the first sprint. And during the next iterations, it will be adjusted again and again to better respond to the client requirements. Actually, I like to image Scrum artifacts by using the example of a chocolate cake recipe. Indeed, the project backlog can be associated to the list of ingredients that you need to make the cake. Then the sprint backlog is referred to the different steps of the recipe. And finally, the project increment is the chocolate cake ready to be eaten. So as I already mentioned, there is a Scrum team because a project without a team can be achieved. And I recommend you to have a team of 3 to 9 people. So the group must be small enough to facilitate the communication, but enough to collaborate in order to bring the project to life. So the Scrum team must be self-organized and cross-functional. Self-organized because of the absence of a leader or a manager, since the team carries out its task independently, and cross-functional because the team member must have the knowledge and the skills to develop the project. As you may see on the screen, there are 3 roles in the Scrum team. So the first one, which is the project owner, then you have the Scrum Master, and finally, the team of development and testing. So the project owner is the link between the client and the project team, since he carries the client stakes and the objective initially set. He chooses the order of the client's requests and presents them to the project team, and he's the one who writes the client's user stories and who makes sure that everybody has understand the specificities requested. To sum up, his role is quite essential since the interest of the Agile methodologies is to integrate the customer into the development process. Then the Scrum Master is characterized as a facilitator or a coach for the team since he is the guardian of the Scrum method good practices. Initially, he is the facilitator of the rituals, the meetings that I will present to you right after. And he's the one who facilitates the good understanding within the team and the good understanding between the team and the rest of the company. And finally, you have the team of development and testing. So here the team members choose the task on which they want to work. Remember, the Scrum team is self-organized. They think collectively and there is transparency between all members. The transparency, remember, which is the first pillar of the Scrum method. And finally, one team is dedicated to one backlog, or more simply to one project. So here are the Scrum rituals that I mentioned while explaining the role of the Scrum Master. The first ritual is the sprint planning, which consists for the team in creating a sprint backlog in which there are all the tasks that the team commits to finish at the end of the sprint. And that sprint backlog represents the sprint's goal. So the duration of a sprint planning varies between 2 hours to 8 hours maximum. It depends on the iteration time. So if you have a sprint of 1 week, you will have a sprint planning of 2 hours. And if you have a sprint of 4 weeks, you will have a sprint planning of 8 hours. I put some tips under the explanation. So I recommend you to pay attention to time, to not neglect breaks, and to keep in mind the variables that can impact your availability. That is to say, your family who tries to call you, your customers, clients who wants to program a meeting at that time, and any other variables. Then you have the daily Scrum meeting. Here, the team of development and testing is the one that oversees this meeting. And each team member is going to answer to 3 questions. So, what have I done yesterday? What am I going to do today? And do I have blocking points? The durations here is 15 minutes. And I recommend you to set a timer to organize the meeting every day at the same time. Obviously, video conferences are possible, and I recommend you to not read or recite your tasks. In the third, you have the sprint review. So this ritual allows the stakeholder to follow the progress of the project. That is to say, if it respects the client's vision and the potential adaptation that needs to be made as it is developed. Here, the duration varies between 1 hour to 4 hour maximum, and I recommend you to rate comments, to prepare the meeting in advance, and to not hesitate to ask questions to the stakeholders, because we already see that the goal in the Agile method is to collect as much feedback as possible. And finally, the last ritual is the sprint retrospectives. So this meeting is dedicated to the team's members so they can start thinking about their proper functioning of it. In here, you may discuss on the effectiveness of processes or tools, but also on relationships between members, on problems in the sprint and on what worked well and what didn't work. Here, it varies between 45 minutes to 3 hours maximum, and the tips are the same than the sprint reviews. So to sum up the Scrum method, I choose this picture because, as you can see here, you have the needs of the clients, the users, the team, and the stakeholders, which are communicate to the project owner, which is going to create the project backlog by prioritize them. Then you have the first ritual, the sprint planning meeting, in which the team will select the task on which they commit to finish at the end of the sprint. Then you have your sprint backlog with the list of the tasks. You can start the sprints, in which you have the daily Scrum meeting, the sprint reviews, and the sprint retrospectives, which are first led by the Scrum Master and then by the team, to finally get the project increment. Okay. Up. And now I can present you the Kanban methodology, which is the second agile methodologies that I choose. Because this is the one that was most mentioned during my interviews with the Fit Retail's employees. So the Kanban method involves the visualizations of workflows through a board called Kanban board. It allows you to prioritize and monitor the progress of the tasks that must be accomplished. I want you to keep in mind that a classic Kanban board have a 3 steps workflow, so to do, in progress, and done. But as you may see on the screen, some companies add a 2 test column to well distinguish a task that is in progress from a task that is done, but not tested and so not validated. And you have to know that each task is represented by a separate card on the board, which contain essential information about a task. So, which allows the team to clearly identify who is doing the task, what it consists of, the approximate time it takes to complete it. Actually, you may put as many information as you need if you consider it necessary for the workflow. And just like any other method, the Kanban method has its own process, which I'm going to present you right now. So the goal of this process is to identify potential bottlenecks and correct them. The first step of the process is the visualization of the work. For it, we must materialize the movement of tasks through the different columns of the Kanban board. That is to say, a task is going from the to-do column, then in progress, then in to test, to finish in the column done. Then the second step is to limit the work in progress. Here you need to stick to the processing cycle of a task from the first column to the done column, which I just explained. And the goal is to avoid having several tasks in progress, to find yourself overflowing without knowing which one to treat in priority. The third step involves focusing on flow. So the goal is to optimize the Kanban system to improve the fluidity of work. For it, you can use work in progress limit that I just explained, and developing team-oriented policies. And finally, the last step of the Kanban process is the continuous improvement. Indeed, when the Kanban system is in place, it serves as a basis for continuous improvement. It helps teams to measure their effectiveness by analyzing, for instance, their follow-up flow, qualification deadlines, and any other aspect of the workflow that can be improved. But now you may ask yourself which method between Scrum and Kanban you must choose to use. First, you have to know that a Kanban board may be used for the task tracking in a Scrum sprint. But here are the main differences that I choose to present you between Scrum and Kanban. In terms of roles, we saw that in Scrum, roles are defined for each team member. Indeed, there is the product owner, the Scrum Master, and the team of development and testing. Whereas in Kanban method, the responsibilities are distributed flexibly. About the commitments, in the Scrum method, the team is engaged on a defined number of features to be delivered. Whereas in the Kanban method, the teams perform their tasks one by one with no limit on the number. In terms of cadences, the Scrum method includes deadline for realizing tasks, while in the Kanban method, the realization of tasks is done continuously without time of constraints. The project have a deadline, but the task card doesn't have a proper deadline. The goal is to finish the project. Then about the iterations, in Scrum, a new task can only be added during the next sprint or under certain conditions. Whereas in the Kanban method, a new task can be added to the table if necessary. And finally, in terms of teams, we saw that the backlog of a sprint belongs only to one team, while in the Kanban method, a Kanban board can be shared by multiple teams. So here is a list of other Agile methodologies that exist. I'm not gonna explain each of them, but if you need some more information about them, you can click on the link just under the title or do your own research on your internet. And here is a list of certifications about the Agile method. So here you have the certifications Prince 2, which is especially opted by Fit Retail, and which was presented by Valentin during another masterclass, which is available on the SharePoint. Here you can see certifications on the Scrum method that I explained. So there's many certifications on it. And by showing you all these certifications, I wanted you to realize that the opportunities are vast and that having a certification allows you to make yourself more legitimate to use the Agile method. And I want to conclude on this picture, so I let you the time to read it. And after that, I want you to tell in comments what will be the moral of it. So in the cascade model, we say you want to go to Mars, you build a rocket, you test a rocket, and you're on Mars. In the Agile, you want to Mars, probably. You begin building a rocket. Now you want to Uranus, you're on the moon. And in Kanban, you want to go to Mars, you break a task into 1,000 small subtasks. A year later, you're waiting for the armrest to be made. What can be the moral of it? You may put on your microphone if you want.
I'm not sure, but I think the cascade model is about complicated and complex projects, so it can be used. But the Kanban, it should be used when like maybe small project or like where there is like a lot of subtasks where it can be made, not really a huge project which needs a result combined. I don't know if you catch me, but
yeah.
So because when you want to build a rockets, like you want to have one result at the end, but in the Kanban model, maybe you can use it when you have some tasks that are not depending on each other to give you a result at the end.
Yeah, it could be that. Sadvik?
Yeah, I guess Kanban method is mainly for like small features, which are, as Abdul has already said, are not related to each other or are just related in a small way. So yeah, when we have, for example, an application which has some sort of many features that should be developed, then maybe Kanban is the best way to do that.
Okay. Actually, this picture comes from LinkedIn, and Thibaut took the first comment, which I'm going to read you, which I really like. So it says, a very funny reminder that agility is not the solution to everything. When you know what you're building, what users expect, that you have been building the same thing for years and that you can rely on facts and our experience without fear, the waterfall model is appropriate. So this can be a way to see this picture. And thank you for your attention. And if you have questions, let's answer to it. Any questions?
Thanks. No, I have no questions.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
It was very clear. Thank you, Wei.
Thank you.
Very well done. Thank you.
Thank you.
So goodbye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Merci beaucoup, Wei.
Merci, Wei.